Okay, we're going to get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today. My name is Akasha Spence. Just so that we're all clear, we are at Culdesac and Towerside, bringing connected, community-centered, transit-oriented development to life. Again, my name is Akasha Spence, and I thank you for joining us. I'm the CEO of Fifth Element, where we believe all people should have the power to decide what happens to them, for them, and in their name. We're a conscientious community development firm building community-based wealth for strategically undercapitalized communities. With a background in public policy, architecture, design, and planning, I lead a multidisciplinary team through ideation, design, and implementation of successful domestic and international systems distilled for local contexts. We work with people like you, developers, architects, agencies, and other like-minded firms and individuals to create policies, financial structures, and land use frameworks that make community ownership a reality. Recently, Fifth Element led and organized a delegation of Portlanders to Vienna, Austria to study social housing. Our discussion today will be led by the projects presented here, but will also draw from the experiences, learning, engaging, and studying one of the Western world's most robust social housing systems. I'm going to take the time now to introduce our panel, and as I introduce them, they can come on up, and you can give them a round of applause and thank them for making the journey here today and coming to talk to us. Our first panelist is Stephen Klimek. He's the executive director of the Towerside Innovation District in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota's first innovation district. Stephen leads efforts to build a more equitable, sustainable, and resilient urban future through collaboration across public, private, and civic partners. He brings a systems thinking lens to neighborhood transformation, advancing climate-ready infrastructure, district energy systems, and coordinated real estate development that turn visionary plans into tangible change. With a background spanning architecture, planning, and nonprofit leadership, Stephen has managed multi-million-dollar initiatives in stormwater, energy, and transit-oriented development. Stephen has always worked at the intersection of design, community, and system change. Before leading Towerside, he served as a senior planner for the Metropolitan Council and worked with the Van Allen Institute, Hester Street, and the Cornerstone Group. He is committed to building inclusive, resilient, urban development that helps cities and communities thrive. Let's welcome Stephen. Our next panelist is Ryan Johnson, who's the co-founder and CEO of Culdesac. He was on the founding team of Open Door and has worked with Bain Capital, the New York Metropolitan Transit Authority, and with the government of Chile on its urban planning initiatives. Ryan has been a real estate investor and operator for over 18 years. Welcome, Ryan. To get us started, our panelists are going to walk us through their projects. And so they're going to take exactly 7.5 minutes each to share with us and ground us in the work that they've done. And we're going to start with Stephen.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you, Akasha. Thanks, Ryan. I'm super excited to be here with all of you and to share this work. Other things to know about me, these are the things I'm obsessed with. I think place is the most critical unit of change in the world we have today. We'll talk more about that as we go. I think cities and our settlements are some of our greatest inventions and that we get to reinvent them all the time. And I think that's a mental model and a framework to think about. They're really social, economic, political structures. And it always leads me to this question of whose job is it to build a great neighborhood, to sustain a great neighborhood? And I think the answer to that is both no one and everyone at the same time, and that's the unique challenge of trying to just work in a slightly different way. So as Akasha mentioned, I'm the executive director of Towerside Innovation District in Minneapolis and St. Paul. This is an older aerial, but you can see downtown Minneapolis right in the background, the University of Minnesota right next to what's been an expansive amount of real estate development along the Green Line light rail that opened 10 years ago, connecting downtown St. Paul to downtown Minneapolis. And I think we're all solving for a lot of the same problems, but I think it's helpful to put it out there that these are really big challenges and there can be bigger opportunities depending on how we approach this work. From climate and resilience, equity, housing and demographic shifts, infrastructure and economy, belonging and civic life. I don't think these are really siloed issues. They're system problems, and they're all rooted in space and place. And I don't think the challenge is about what we necessarily always build, but how we build and how we align those things to produce better outcomes. So Towerside is both a place, an idea, and an organization. So it is a transit-oriented community, again, on the center of the region catalyzed by the Green Line light rail. I'm very excited that we're about to have a BRT opening in just a few months as well. It's a 370-acre district designated by both the City of Minneapolis and City of St. Paul, right adjacent to the University of Minnesota's Life Science campus, and it spans both the cities and both counties of Hennepin County and Ramsey County. And it's been this place-based partnership that's grown out of these kinds of contexts dedicated to creating this high-density, vibrant mix of uses in this kind of living lab that you can see on the left, an older pre-light rail. This is about 2012 when the alignment was identified. And this area was a remnant of industrial uses, abandoned sheet metal factories. Over the last decade, there's been intensive amount of development, as you can see, right along the Green Line. And it really began with community visioning, realizing that change was going to happen. How do we shape that change and be part of it so that it happens with us and according to a vision that we set? I think the unique question becomes, who does that work and how does that happen? So there's a lot of engagement and visioning. I think it was great to hear the Albina Vision Trust talk this morning, very similar, that big ideas and lots of values-driven effort came through, but how are we actually going to implement and how do we take really big ideas and make them real? One of the first big dream ideas that came through was in this older industrial land area. You know, there were no streets, there were no sidewalks, there was very little infrastructure. One of the first community dream goals was a green street that would be the front yard for thousands of new housing units that were expected. And it was the longest project it took for us to pull off, but has actually been successful. It's a dense, habitat-rich, really green street, has social spaces, reduced parking, new bike lanes. And I think one of the most interesting pieces, it's a shared operation system with all of the landowners, and we can talk more about that. I think one of our other big signature projects is a district stormwater system. This is a private stormwater system that manages all of the stormwater, snowmelt, and runoff for 8 acres with 4 different property owners, and they now all share this system together. So it collects the stormwater, it treats it in a giant bioretention area, stores it in a 200,000 gallon tank underground. It's UV treated, so it also irrigates the community garden that's right next to it. And then it's also piped back to all the properties for reuse. And it's part of a kind of integrated public realm next to Green Forest Street and that new park, Bridal Veil Gardens, which is a 1-acre signature green space that really its design was informed by interim uses that we instigated along the way, kind of through placemaking, temporary community gardens. And it was actually built with the park board's 1% park dedication fee. It was a new policy. Our park board is an independent agency in Minneapolis, and all of the development on 4th Street paid for this park. And the location of the park, the design features came through in all of the kind of different iterations of talking about the district stormwater system, talking about Green Forest Street, and thinking through what partners and community wanted to see here. I think some overall big outcomes to share and thinking about it more as city building work. There's, again, the 3 LRT stations that our district covers, 4 new BRT stations, 4,000 units of housing, and that runs the gamut of everything from student housing, luxury housing, market rate, workforce, affordable, senior, independent senior, assisted living, memory care, and this is all in a pretty concentrated area on transit. 20% are affordable just by nature. There's no requirement of the unit counts. A full-service grocery store has come through, and there's major kind of destination amenities and breweries, distilleries, food halls that bring a lot of people into this district and are really driving job growth. Shout out to Metro Transit. Thank you for your development trends along transit report you do every year. Met Council and Metro Transit in the Twin Cities really track what happens, and this is really valuable for us to help tell the story of how quickly this place is changing, what it is becoming and how that aligns with what the community and partners want to see it become. How I like to think about a lot of our portfolio of work is this hardware of the things. And that's a lot of what shows up on slides, and it's a good presentation. But it's these district scale coordinated infrastructure projects, stacking benefits like having stormwater management and accessible green space. But I think it's really helpful and important to pair that with this idea of the software, the planning, the studies, the policy work, and place management systems that actually make the hardware relatable and real. And then also the user experience, that people have to be involved in the process of making all of this work. And that's the visioning, creative placemaking, and engagement. And I think our operating system is the other unique factor, that this is, Towerside's a nonprofit, but we're a backbone organization to a host of dozens of partners. And we're trying to just model this, again, different way of working in collaboration and partnership. Some of those partnerships are really trying to focus on a few signature future efforts. District energy has been one of the dream goals. With so much development happening in such a concentrated area, and similar to stormwater, there was a hope that shared resources in thermal heating and cooling can be combined and connected between buildings. And we've had a couple starts and iterations on that we're hoping to try again on. Minneapolis is really well known for its park system and its regional trails, as the region is, and one of the biggest missing pieces comes right through this district, and so our park boards worked with us and landowners to make sure that that route is set in the district as development happens rapidly. And we're hoping to connect that in with additional green space and really build it as a cohesive network. And also focused on multimodal connections, really trying to think through how we park this place, how people move through here. There's a lot of realities in that developers and finance folks will want to see, and we're trying to see, again, in that shared, stacked, collaborative way, what else does a mobility infrastructure system hold? So all of this for me is about asset-based community development. I don't think we just need new projects, but it's always great to see them, and we really need these new systems for working together. And so for Towerside, it's really about these shared and stacked benefits to deliver greater value and more outcomes than we would in a standalone project. Really practicing partnership and aligning power and purpose across those things and all those roundtables and conversations. Being human-centric and outcomes-based, really thinking about what's the experience we want to have out of this and walk backwards from that, and engaging community as co-creators, not just audiences in all of this work. So we'll leave it with that.
That was longer than 7 minutes, but we thank you. We thank you, Stephen. The timer wasn't working. Ryan, you're up.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here at this conference where, what I'm about is the connection between real estate and transportation. And for millennia, innovation in transportation has powered real estate. And that's really what it's all about. And this mural behind us is actually a great example of how we think about Culdesac, which is at a real estate conference, people are talking about the buildings and the amenities. But for us, it's really about the transportation and how that powers life. And there's a lot of exciting things happening in the transportation world. So you mentioned my background. Earlier, I worked at places like the UN, World Bank, the MTA, really wanted to work to make cities better. And then I had the big realization in my career, which is that walkable neighborhoods create all the great social outcomes that we care about. It creates lower taxes, it creates lower cost of living, happiness, health, climate, all these social impact measures. The best thing we can do is to enable as many people as possible to live in a walkable neighborhood. And it's possible with great transit-oriented projects. And with all the changes in transportation, including e-bikes, and Waymo is going to be the biggest one, it was possible to build walkable neighborhoods again in the US in the 2020s. So at Culdesac, what are we? We're a developer and also neighborhood manager, and we build walkable, mixed-use neighborhoods. And we design for a culture of belonging, transportation freedom, and thriving local businesses. And we provide a model for the future of cities. We do 3 different kinds of projects. Our flagship is Culdesac Tempe. And has anybody been there? Oh, that's amazing. When you come, you should look me up. I live there. I would love to show you around. And it's the most important thing I've ever worked on. So please let me know. We just opened lunch. We've also got 2 pocket neighborhoods in Georgia. Those are for sale affordable projects. that are these pocket neighborhoods where you can take a lot that normally would be for a single family home and instead build a home for many people with a courtyard instead of a big parking lot. We also just got approvals for our next big project. It's Culdesac Mesa. It's going to be 1,000 units. Ultimately, our goal is to build an entire city because the U.S. forgot how to build cities, and a lot of the cities, they're not using the latest technologies, and they have really high costs to renovate things. Look at how much time and money New York spent building a 2-mile subway extension. So that's the big eventual goal. And we got laughed out of the room when we started 7.5 years ago. People said, there's no way you could build without cars. You can't get permission. The demand's not going to be there, and certainly not in a place like Phoenix. And when we were saying that AV ride-hail is going to change everything and be the biggest change of cities of our lives, people said, no way, not in our lifetimes. That's decades away. Now that Culdesac is open, we have hundreds of residents. We're at the epicenter of the largest AV ride-hail operating area in the world. It's now a foregone conclusion. People love it. And there's more people that visit Culdesac every day than live there. And it's really changing narratives. We get so many cities and other developers that visit it, and the biggest thing they say is, how can we get one of these where we are? Which is one of my goals here today, is to meet you and to hear about what kind of projects we could do in your city. I was already talking about Minneapolis. This is where we're at. So we have 17 acres, and it's right on the light rail. My uncle actually worked on the light rail, and they built these walkways to nowhere so that one day developers could build crosswalks, and those crosswalks are there today. There's not just our project, but there's been an explosion in development all around us. If you actually take a mile outside of Culdesac, there's more new development right now than either the cities of New York or San Francisco build in a year, which is not a good stat, but it shows what's possible. And Phoenix, despite being the center of sprawl, it's a big reason we wanted to do this was to prove that if you could do it in Phoenix, you can do it anywhere. But despite that, there's still so much demand for great walkable neighborhoods, and that's why it's doing so well. So this is our design. The only parking is for retail and for visitors. The thing that we get known for is being car-free, and the headlines would always change. The Wall Street Journal said, if the print version said, developer tries innovative new concept or something. And then the online editor kept changing the headline to see what gets clicks. And then they said, developer bans cars. And it instantly went super viral, the top city of the day, or the top story of the day. And that's what we're known for. But we didn't actually ban cars. But when people visit, it's the retail. So we have 24 local businesses. And it's permeable, so it's not just a neighborhood that's gated that doesn't add amenities, which is kind of why people oppose housing. The neighbors love it, the city loves it, and so do our residents. And there's 8 blocks, there's 50 courtyards, and it looks nothing like the kind of housing that we build in the US today. And people know their neighbors, and they have a lot more friends, and they're a lot happier. And the way that this works is that our residents use a portfolio of transportation options. So our residents have free or discounted rides on the light rail, buses, Lyfts and Waymos. We have hourly car rental on site for weekend trips and things. Electric bikes, the #1 e-bike company is against all odds based in Phoenix. They're from Minnesota. And scooters. And these things all play together so that our residents save several $100s a month on average. I think they spend $200 a month on average on transportation. We prioritize for a culture of belonging. We have residents that say they've made more connections living in Culdesac 6 months than 15 years living in the suburbs. One resident just had a kid, and we even have families there despite how hard it is to compete with the minivan. Our residents have transportation freedom. This is Electra. She's vision impaired. And people always say, but what if I want to have a car? And I say, but what about the millions of Americans who can't drive? And Electra feels like it's the first time she's lived somewhere that's designed for her. We have great stories for our thriving local businesses. This is So Used, a vintage clothing store. I know you have a thrift store on the back here. This is oddly good, appropriate for Culdesac, this mural. They started out with a table at our night market. Then they graduated to their first brick and mortar space in one of our live-work units that offer flexible leases. And then they moved into a full traditional, scary commercial lease, the kind that most retailers couldn't get started if that was step 1. But instead, it happens because of this on-ramp to entrepreneurship. And a key thing is a lot of developers sort of have this antagonistic relationship with cities. and are cynical about it. We found the opposite, that working with cities, they want to have great developments, and we've had wonderful public-private collaboration. We have lots of events. The city had a strip mall they wanted to redevelop into affordable housing, and we helped them get their last tenant, and that's where I got my haircut for today. We also helped the city get a DOT grant to open a protected bike lane that connects our project to many other amenities nearby. So that's Culdesac, and we think that this is a model for how we can build housing in the US, to build the kind of neighborhoods that we used to have. So many of our best neighborhoods are the ones that we built before cars, and that's not a coincidence. It happened before because of design restrictions, and now it happens because we know what's best and can use modern technology. Thank you.
Now for the tough stuff. They're able to talk about themselves and really ground us in their work, and I'm happy to see that some of you have already visited Culdesac. I'm next up. Soon I should be able to visit and have Ryan give many of us, if we go together, a tour. But you know, one of the things that we really have to grapple with here in Oregon and all across the United States is that fact that there is a housing crisis, right? That for many Americans, the promise of a safe, stable, and affordable home is slipping out of their reach. And this is for people of all incomes across generations, right? We're seeing young people not be able to transition into home ownership. We're seeing older folks who are retiring not being able to maintain their homes or be able to stay in place or age in place. And so in thinking about, you know, how to create transit-oriented development, right? We're saying that this was something that you all decided was the crux of your development, the impetus for it, right? But how do you integrate that with the fact that people are struggling to find not only homes, but a sense of place in their locales? How were you trying to solve that problem as well as you were thinking about Towerside, this large master plan, and then Culdesac, more specifically, this community plan?
I'll start. Those are great questions, and I think a lot of what the community that started the vision we have really was trying to grapple with. I think it's actually really amazing. There's a lot of great stories. There's a number of folks that live in the senior housing project who are from the neighborhood, that this was their opportunity to sell their home, keep their connections, keep their neighbors, and move a block down the road. The owner of Surly Brewing, his mother lives in the senior housing project, and she keeps tabs on her son at work all the time. And so I think there's those kind of little connections that have happened now. But I think our emphasis on the public realm has been the biggest thing, to make sure that there are streetscapes, there are parks, they're programmed as much as we can, and we try to push the landowners to continue engaging with us on that. The sense of identity is also something that I'm particularly curious about, and SAS-specific infrastructure and just how we connect and relate to each other. And I think the process of building place with others is really powerful in that. Again, we've been doing it for millennia. We've just been doing it wrong lately. So actually right now we're doing a community pulse survey out in the community. It's been a while since we've really hit the ground, and some really honest just questions to ask. What's your place-based experience? What's it like to be here? Where do you have challenges? Where do you feel safe? Where do you feel a sense of community? And what do you want the vision for this place to be? Because again, we have 4,000 new units of housing. That's thousands of new people. The neighborhood's population's almost tripled. How do we make sure that they're participating in this and not just being a resident, showing up, getting in their car, or jumping on the train and going to work, but they can be part of the process?
In the US today, we've only been building two kinds of housing. We've been building single-family homes where you don't know your neighbors and you have a painful commute and everything's more expensive because of cars. And we build soulless mid-rise projects that have double-loaded corridors, and they're somehow both lonely and claustrophobic. You just park your car, don't make eye contact with anybody, and get to your unit, and all the investment is in the quality of the unit. And instead, a walkable neighborhood has so many benefits and creates this culture of belonging. And we do lots of surveys of our residents as well. They're radically happier than in typical projects. My favorite stat is the percentage that have a good friend. It's also the #1 driver of resident retention, which is so important from a business perspective. And people just have far more friends here. It's the best thing we can do for all these social metrics.
You talk a lot about, the folks who are coming into these new developments and finding a sense of place and belonging. How have you seen it integrate in existing communities? I think oftentimes if you're living in a community you've been there for a while, and now something brand new and shiny comes, do you feel like it's something that is accessible to you, that you are a part of it, that you can gain the benefit from it? And how have you been grappling with the potential for gentrification and displacement as you're building these new complexes that, again, feel good to the people who are coming in, but may feel different to those who've already been there?
It's a really important question. So around Culdesac Tempe, if you go a mile out, there's been more new construction now than either New York or San Francisco builds in a year. And unsurprisingly, rents are down. And the cities that build the most, if you look at what's happening in Austin, you can get a great apartment for under $1,000 right now just because so much was built. And so when we build more, prices come down and are more affordable. When we stop building, the best areas get bought up, and that creates these challenges. So the best thing we can do is to build more, and especially more quality housing.
There's a number of places I want to start. I think, so for an example, the neighborhood wanted a grocery store, didn't have one before. And it was like, well, we need to grow the demand, we need to have more people here. And there's a developer that maybe is interested, we can negotiate and help them get more density, make the argument for a grocery store, and it worked. And it's one of the most popular grocery stores. They wish they built it twice as big. It's the most profitable grocery store that this vendor has in their market. And so there's kind of those little stories, and I think trying to scale that up to say, well, what else does this neighborhood need? What else do we want to have? What are the assets that are here that we want to strengthen and protect to make sure they don't go away and get displaced, whether that's an arts organization or just a community elder and someone who has a lot of strength and power in the community. And our interim uses in the early days, there was a lot of big talk and lots of architects waving hands over maps and Post-it notes. I'm sure you're all very familiar with that experience. Making sure that there was a pop-up community garden that we could have on the site, because we knew nothing was going to happen for a while. Spending time and energy in that, investing in that was an opportunity for folks from the public housing community to make sure that they felt it was their space. Yeah. And when the new park design came through, they felt like they had a right to name it, and they wanted to be part of it. And so I think that memory and storytelling is another important part of that.
Thank you. Here in Portland, we are having a conversation and a public discourse around social housing and how we could potentially bring that to create permanently affordable housing, right? That is cost-based. In Vienna, their social housing model has this cost-based system, meaning rents are based on the true cost of development, and that so you're not having these rapid fluctuations, and that there are open leases. So once you're in a rental unit, you can be there. There's no annual renewal that you have a lot of consternation about. How much are they going to raise it? How much is it going to be this time? And so this policy, is in the social housing system, but it also extends to the private market. And so in the private market, you'll see leases for 3 to 5 years. So people have long-term leases. They're able to stay there, able to feel comfortable and rooted in their communities. And so I'm wondering, as we talk about affordability today, we also have to think about affordability in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years. How are you planning for that level of long-term affordability? I'm going to talk a little bit to you, Ryan, about the fact that right now I know units at Culdesac range for studios to 3 bedrooms from $1,300 to $2,800 a month. And that right now a lot of your renter profiles are young families, PhD students, and working class Arizonans. Is that what you say, Arizonans? And can you talk about how you all, or if it is even a plan at Culdesac to create permanent affordability across the life cycle?
So we have 4 projects now. 2 of those are for sale affordable housing, so that's something we do. The biggest thing that we can do for affordability is to lower transportation costs. We talk about housing costs, but transportation is number 2, and just those 2 things are the majority of household spend. And at Culdesac, our residents, the average American spends over $1,000 a month on a car now, and it's a tragedy that we built our cities so people feel like they need to. R.I.P. Donald Shoup. Our residents spend on average something like $200 a month on transportation. So that is a massive jump in affordability, and we've done things like help the city build a protected bike lane that improves the access so people can get a lot more places without a car. We're big champions and partners of the light rail system, and Phoenix we just opened our second line, we just lowered headways. We have the opportunity to make it so people can live their entire life along the light rail, and it's happening in a big way. Our fourth project is also on that same light rail. So that impact and what y'all do in the transportation world is actually making housing affordability happen.
Can you just clarify? So you said that you're building affordable homeownership on that same site, because I know that there is still land that is developable around that area that you all own. Is there a plan to create that permanent affordable housing homeownership there? And is there a plan for the rentals to remain affordable outside of transportation? So for instance, a lot of folks work from home, so maybe they don't have the car, so maybe they're not spending that $1,000, but they're still rent burdened. How do you see that, stability in rental prices coming into play for Culdesac?
Yeah, it's a really important question. We have 2 for-sale affordable projects. Those 2 are in Atlanta, and our projects in Arizona will be market rate. And the biggest thing to allow for more construction, because right now with construction costs, 90% of the multifamily projects in the U.S. are stalled, and that's even just market rate projects aren't penciling. And to get rents lower, the most important thing is that we restart the construction engine.
Do you want me to jump in on a couple of
Yes,
pieces?
please.
I think for us, it's about, our affordable housing developers are long-term holders and owners. They're committed to these buildings. They're going to be here for forever. I think it's also about diversifying the developer pipeline in the Twin Cities. It's a smaller community of folks, and so talking to people like Culdesac and saying, what about this opportunity? How do you see something different than the traditional developments that we're seeing, and how we can change that form? Similar with the mobility piece, I'd be remiss to talk more about our district energy system. I mean, part of the goal in that was that energy costs are one of the most unpredictable future costs for families as well. And so in addition, beyond rental cost burden, cost of energy is going to be a huge concern in the next 5-10 years. The ability to lower those or to make them set pieces and actually have a community-owned geothermal system that profits go back into the community could be a really game-changing system.
Thank you for that, Stephen. One of the things you said in your presentation was that, the question of whose job is it to make and sustain a great neighborhood? And I think about all the things that make a great neighborhood. Yes, it's going to be those open spaces and those green spaces, and really affordable, beautiful. I always talk about aesthetics. I'm a very aesthetically driven person. It has to be gorgeous place to live. But also I think about the fact that often here we find when we're asking people to think about their housing production strategies and we're asking communities to think about how to welcome densification, you hear a lot of feedback around, well, how are we going to have enough teachers for the schools? How are we going to have enough, infrastructure to build out the roads? And it's going to put more strain on our water systems and all of these. And I know you talked about water systems, so that's an opportunity to plug it again. But how are you all, with these 370 acres that you have to develop, thinking about those other pieces that need to be integrated to make a community a really great place for everyone to live?
I think that really speaks to the district approach. The Towerside is at its origin story and drives the kind of work we do. If there's a one-off project that someone can do on their own and doesn't really need a coordinated support or navigation, that's not maybe the best place for us. And that can happen in the district. We don't really have regulations or controls necessarily at the moment. The holistic perspective about what does it take to do place, having people around a table, having that governance operating system to say, all right, well, who is going to work on what? And then let's also then say what falls through the gaps right now. Whose job is it to catch that?
Yeah.
And try to position some of it's about positioning Towerside and or finding other partners to jump in and to do that, whether it's holding things in an interim or actually trying to move things forward in a different kind of way, and to have that dynamic so that there's value add in catching these things that fall through. So the elementary school right just south of Towerside, neighborhood institution, everyone who's an institutional resident in the neighborhood has gone there, their children have gone there, their grandchildren are going there, and it's regularly under threat of having to close for renovation costs. And so that's one of the places we're making sure we engage in our community pulse survey and make sure that it's clear that this is an asset. What does it need to continue being an asset in the future as all this changes?
Thank you, I appreciate that. I'm gonna ask a nerdy question because I think this is the audience for it. The only people outside of this room who talk about zoning are homeowners and city officials and developers and all of us. But it is the bedrock of our communities, right? It helps to shape what is possible and what kind of development can take place. And so I'm thinking about how existing zoning codes and the broader municipal regulatory environment, fees and permitting and processes serve and or challenge your projects. Here in the Portland metro region, our zoning until a few years ago was largely exclusionary. And it restricted density and equitable access to homes and homeownership in particular. And so there have been a lot of legal and legislative changes to make those changes a reality, to build missing middle and to do all of these things. And yet and still we're not seeing, like you're saying in Culdesac, that because this one got built, all of these others got built, and there's this, environment where rents are decreasing because we have so much volume. And so I'm wondering, you were able to, create a development of over 200 units with no parking. What did that take? What did that look like? What were your relationships that you had to build and the partnerships you had to build to make that a reality?
Yeah, good question. So in the US, we've largely been building sprawl because of this cycle of we require parking to be all over, which means that we build things far apart and everything's more expensive and people feel like they need to have a car to get around. And then we look at that and think that's a choice, that they chose to have a car when in fact they just had to. And then that reinforces the laws and we require parking. It makes groceries more expensive, it makes housing more expensive, the police department, the fire department, every department is more expensive. And it's a real tragedy. And that kind of sprawl housing is very easy to permit. And we're building millions of units of that per year. On the other hand, doing the infill things is often a lot harder when we can make lives better by making more walkable neighborhoods and adding more people to walkable neighborhoods. And it makes the neighborhoods better. There's more restaurants, there's better healthcare, there's better education on so many different dimensions. And so when we started the company, we were based in San Francisco. It's a city that has extremely high housing costs but doesn't want more housing, so we didn't go there. We instead looked all over the country for places that welcome growth. And we found a great partner in the city of Tempe. We talked to all the different stakeholders, community groups, fire department, all the departments at the city, and brought forth a plan that we knew they could get behind. And so they approved it. They made the first agreement of its kind between a city and a developer to build without residential parking, which was a big monumental decision. But now they look back on that and looks back on that as like, oh wow, we can do this. And our biggest thing that we can do for the country is to prove that you can build walkable neighborhoods successfully again in the US in the 2020s.
Part of what you also did, I think you're not telling enough of the story, was ensure that every resident at Culdesac had access to this thing called a Platinum Pass, which gives all of the residents free access to transit. And I'm wondering, that's amazing. How did you get that done? And what is the long-term sustainability of that? Like, how does it get paid for?
Yeah, the Platinum Pass, we actually had to pass because it wasn't something that they had, and because of the bureaucracy involved in the light rail, they actually had to pass a new piece of legislation in the city of Phoenix, which meant we had to get approvals in a second city. It passed unanimously to allow us to do it, and we think it's a role model for other developers that when you let your residents have great transportation freedom, it means you don't have to build as much or none structured parking. It's a big mistake for any developer that's building structured parking now with what's coming in transportation change. But instead, they can build plazas and courtyards and retail, and we have a great gym, and that's what's possible when you really build for transportation.
And then just talk a little bit also about the fact that essentially, in addition to creating this access to the public transit, you've also created access to other modes of transportation. One of the things that broke my heart during the pandemic that we saw go away here was car-to-go. I didn't own a car at all because I had car-to-go. And once that left, I then needed a car because I wanted to go to the coast. I wanted to go here. And so you have access to these rideshare programs that are, either it's like like a Uber or Waymo that's dropping you from your home to another destination, but then you also have those rideshare opportunities for longer trips and things like that. And so how are you, we really want to know the nitty-gritty of how you're brokering the deals with these companies to make sure that they're partners in your development. Did you start in the beginning? Did you have conversations when you were in the design and development phase? How did you get them on board?
Yeah, I mean, we have deep relationships with these companies because they're the ones that are driving the transportation change. We work closely with the light rail system and the bus system. By far the most popular method of transportation at Culdesac is the light rail. Buses are number 2. But also we're close with following the innovations in the e-bike landscape and the scooter landscape, and all these things play together. And one of the reasons we chose Phoenix is because that was Waymo's first market. They've been actually 12 years in the market now. 2.5 years with their Jaguars, which is, I think that is the real launch of Waymo's arrived. And so we have a front row seat in Phoenix to seeing how this changes. And the new biggest, loudest demographic of riders, of lovers of Waymo is parents. And you would not believe, how many people have tried a Waymo? That's pretty good. It's really important from a transportation landscape and also a technology landscape to try one. So come to Phoenix. There are in other cities now too. But parents, you wouldn't believe the praise. It's effusive. They're like, I have my freedom back. Like they're sending their kids to school and they have a life again. And it's, childcare is one of the reasons why it's so hard to be a parent. It's, the challenges of getting kids around. It's not safe for kids to bike anymore. And even the birth rate can be impacted by this kind of thing. So we wanted to be in Phoenix to be part of that. We actually have dedicated parking for Waymo so that our residents can have the lowest weights. They also get discounted rides. And it's not one magic thing that powers this. It's how all of them work together. The light rail alone would not be nearly as powerful, or Waymo alone wouldn't be as nearly as powerful. They all work together. And one more, how many people have tried an e-bike? Yeah, good. I saw they had parking out here. Somebody has a Turn GSD, great bike. E-bike is a sneakily important transportation innovation because it expands your radius dramatically, where if you can go 5 times as far in the same time, that's 25 times the area of your life.
Yeah, I think it's really important you talk about the fact that it's not one thing or the other, it's the system that works together to make it effective. Stephen, Towerside's partnership list is enviable. It's 2 cities, 2 counties, multiple private entities. They have the insurance companies on board. We got to know, how did you figure that out? How did you broker that partnership? And what is their role in the development process, right? Like, how are you navigating what influence Blue Cross Blue Shield has over what happens in this across these 370 acres versus someone like the land bank that is also a partner? How are you brokering levels of engagement and influence and power as you have this really large partnership list?
That's a great question. And it really comes back to the origin story of the neighborhood producing this really ambitious vision and then realizing that's way beyond their own capacity to implement this. And so they needed to bring other people to the table. And so, the Blue Cross is one of my favorite stories and examples. So Blue Cross Blue Shield in Minnesota had tobacco settlement dollars from a lawsuit. And their mandate was to invest in upstream social determinants of health. And that ran the gamut of things. But when they, similar to the watershed, thinking that we work at a district scale, water works at a district scale, health works at a district scale, and that a walkable green street is a social determinant of health impact, and they invested several $100,000s in the design and construction of our green street network. And that was an incredible kind of example to say, if you just think about it at a system lens and just take a slight step back and like, what are all of these things impacting, and who leads in those spaces, who shapes that work, and let's bring them into a conversation. So our partnership is set up, and we're, again, a backbone organization as a 501c3. Our partners are supporter organizations that vote on who our board of directors are, our public agencies, and our nonprofits. And so we have a bit of an accountability structure within that they determine who leads our organization, and our organization sets up the structures by which we have partnerships. So I think with the Community Pulse Survey and kind of renewed capacity over the last couple of years, we're really excited to expand what it means to be partners. Blue Cross Blue Shield and the Center for Prevention that had that fund has closed down since. The fundings have been spent. But it's a great story that we can leverage to say, all right, well, who else can do this? And so the land bank is a good example. They're also growing and curious about the idea of, and they're actually located in the Innovation District. Their offices are. Like, what if we had a demonstration project in our backyard? Yeah. What would that look like? And so thinking about those really key development sites between the public housing community that really physically is cut off from where the light rail is. Maybe there's a site we want to get in there and build a pedestrian connection and have new housing. Or maybe there's a really tricky commercial building that has like way below market rents, and it is on the market right now. It's very easy for that to just get swept up and become something very flashy and fancy, but also maybe there's partners can come in and have us have a longer time frame to play with different kinds of ideas.
Yeah, I think I'm really particularly interested in the land bank and their involvement. And you said they're doing a demonstration project. I think, developable land across our cities is scarce. And so I'm wondering, in your partnership with them and other maybe community-based developers, what is Towerside's work there? Are you helping develop land for or remediate land, or because I think the site was previously an industrial site. And so are you preparing the land for development by helping to alleviate some of the cost of development to those affordable housing developers? Are you helping the land bank acquire? What does that look like? What is Towerside's role?
What is Towerside? It's an odd duck, admittedly. And as part of to the policy question, I'd say our city resolutions set up set up a system where we can talk to the cities and say, we want to have some exemptions to policy. We want to test things and do things that are slightly different, and the resolutions kind of enable us to do that.
Wait, could you back up? So there's a city resolution that does what exactly?
So it designated Towerside an innovation district. Mm-hmm. I think there's the early on planning and this kind of community-driven thing was robust enough that everyone's like, what is it? Right. Like, it's not city planning. It's not a developer. It doesn't own land. This doesn't fit into our few boxes and silos of how place is shaped and worked. And they're like, well, you're next to the university, so you must be an innovation district. But it's really, I think it's an asset-based community development that's trying to take all of these different pieces and figure out how they work together. So I like to describe Towerside as a producer, of a movie. It's a curator, it's a conductor, it's trying to take a holistic perspective about who's here, what's moving, and how does that change this holistic systems approach. And to kind of broker the conversation. So for example, the district stormwater system was built, and the watershed asked, and we helped interface with all the landowners to say, what would your cost be to manage your stormwater requirements? Because there's a legal requirement they have to do. And they said, give us that money, we'll build you a better system and satisfy your requirements. Okay. Which means they had more density opportunities, they had more space, green space on their sites, and didn't have to worry about taking care of that stormwater piece. And so I think it's that kind of model within that. And so we're hoping, and I'm instigating is probably another good word for Towerside, with the land bank to see what kind of demonstration projects can we have. And they also helped really early on to suss out, just for a community-driven effort that didn't have a full understanding of real estate, what are the right sites? What are land prices? How do we hold some of these key things for a long time? Who are the developers we should be talking to and inviting into the opportunity to say, we'd like you to work with us on this funky
Culdesac.
Culdesac.
Apparently, we're all here to support Ryan and Culdesac in getting a project at
We're very
Towerside. Anything can happen. And so, you're talking about, stormwater and all of these kinds of community resilience models, right? And so I'm thinking about the ways in which we see transportation as being fundamental to climate resilience and community resilience and sustainability. What are some of the other ways that you're looking at technological advances or the things that you want to embed in your developments to secure our climate future? And then also, as the uncertainty of future mobility, as technology advances, how are you planning for that? I think, Ryan, you started to talk about that, where people, when you first talked about the idea of cul-de-sac, people laughed you out of the room because you saw a future that others couldn't envision. And so how are you looking at having the foresight to know what might be coming, planning for that in your developments, and creating a change in a very uncertain environment due to climate and other uncertainties that we're dealing with?
Yeah, things have really changed, and it was always a matter of when, not if, for AV ride hail. But now, 7.5 years in, it's a lot easier to plan for it. And one of the hardest things in the development or city business is risk, and it's now a lot lower risk. And so others should look at that to say, we now have a much better idea of where things are going. You can project forward what's going to happen with all of these technologies. And cities can help link them better to help turn these services into last mile services to help the light rail. So there's so many more things that we could do. The approach we took for Culdesac Tempe was prove that you could make walkable neighborhoods work again in the U.S. in the 2020s. We said, let's not try to make all of the other good things part of it, but over time, and as it's de-risked, we can.
Thank you. I think, Stephen, due to the scale of your project, I think, historically we would think that there would be federal partnerships. There would be folks coming in and clamoring to support the work that you're doing. And so thinking about that level of uncertainty as well as you navigate, global climate change uncertainty and thinking about how some of the assets, you talk about asset-based development, some of the assets that were already a part of Towerside are kind of helping you to navigate the uncertainty of that future.
Yes. And I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is our goal around district energy and shared heating, cooling, electrification. That's construction costs and transportation costs, building operations. Those are the biggest greenhouse gas emissions in Minnesota. And so those are the places that we need to start working. And that's, again, why place is one of the most important unit changes. Like, these are really spatial issues. And so we were very excited for IRA funding, and we were chugging along last year to see how we could take advantage of some of those federal opportunities to invest in really forward-thinking advanced climate infrastructure, which aquifer-based and or even sewer thermal capture systems we're just literally flushing energy and heat down the toilet and down the shower drain every year, every day, thinking about how all of these things work together. So we're trying to find developers that are interested in trying to capture that and work through that kind of a system, because it's a very different way of building and working, and seeing there's some new great local and state investments in this that we're hoping to tap.
And in Arizona, we have the opposite challenge of the cold of Minnesota, which is the heat. And the car-dependent sprawl has created a pretty severe heat island effect, where the desert temperatures, they go down 33 degrees at night, but it's made worse because the asphalt absorbs heat. So Culdesac Tempe feels at least 15 degrees cooler than the apartment across the street. And that's because there's not a drop of asphalt, there's reflective colors, and there's lots of shade. And that makes it more livable, and that's an important part of climate adaptation. And the more that we build that way, the better it is for climate. Yeah,
I really appreciated, as I was looking at photos and sections and plans of the cul-de-sac development, how they have these really beautiful breezeways that sort of remind you of older cities in Europe, whereby you're walking through these places and it feels really cool and calm, and the earth is actually earth, it's not asphalt, right? And so it just feels more human, and it gives you this different connection to the place itself, and it's more inviting. And so I really did appreciate that, and I hope that maybe, again, trying to pitch Ryan to Towerside, maybe that can be some of the passive strategies that Towerside can integrate with their developers.
And people will bike in the snow if you have good bike infrastructure.
Absolutely, I've done it. And so I want to pivot a little bit to talking about small business. As we all think about transit-oriented development, often we're thinking about mixed-use development, right? We're going to have the retail on the bottom, the residential on the top, and at least in Portland, there are so many of these spaces that are vacant, just completely empty. And so we're thinking about how do we make it so that fledgling small businesses can take root in these spaces. And I think, Ryan, in your model, you started by creating these 500 square foot studios that were originally made to be residential, but they had this flexibility that they could be turned into retail. And so you got these really small micro retail spaces where people were able to say that, okay, otherwise I would have to spend $5,000 a month on a retail space. This gives me the flexibility to start my own business without financial insecurity. And so I'm thinking about how did you do this in your pro forma? Because all the developers I talk to say it's not possible. They can't make it pencil. And I know that you're doing market rate. So could you talk about how you were able to create this flexibility in your pro forma to create micro and medium scale, and to have units that could be residential but aren't live work but could be, and there was so much flexibility here. How did you get that done?
Yeah, to your point, lots of developers have struggled with this, and also when we do TOD, cities often require retail at the base of multifamily buildings, and there's a graveyard, there's a vacant ground floor retail all over the light rail along Phoenix. And the problem is because they're bad retail spaces, because there's no street life. Despite being on the light rail, they have a huge structured parking garage. Everybody just drives their car everywhere, parks at the garage, walks to their unit. It's not a good place to have a retail shop. It's not an exciting place to have a retail shop. And at Culdesac, we have traditional retail, and we have live-work spaces. And the key was flexibility. So they had kitchens, and it's been one of our big upside surprises. We thought it would probably take years to make those live-work spaces have retail tenants as the area developed, and you need lots of customers to be able to support something. And it surprised us that they leased up very quickly, and there's now a waiting list. And the reason why is because it's an exciting place to visit, it's an exciting place to have a store. They feel that being at Culdesac makes their store better and more vibrant. They like coming to work more. And we also have this on-ramp. We do a night market that got best in Phoenix. We even opened that before the project started. It was on the construction site because we wanted to bring energy to the site and introduce people to Culdesac.
Thank you. He's not talking enough about this, but I think that part of what Culdesac did was once they acquired the land, even before any buildings were built, they created this night market where they brought local vendors and local proprietors out to the space so that they can sell their wares or get familiar with the space. And it gave others an opportunity to get familiar with that area, right? To start to take the transit there and to have it become a destination and not just like this vacant land that's like maybe in the middle or the end of this transit stop. And I think that's pretty phenomenal. Could you just talk a little bit more about your decision to do that? Like, how did you have the foresight to have that happen?
We knew we wanted to bring energy to the site, and if we added programming that was done thoughtfully, we started with like event-oriented themes, and our team was fantastic at just executing. A lot of it was just raw execution, and gave it a culture and gave it a reputation. And of course, it starts small, and then each week more and more people would come back and tell their friends. And that's happening then and now at the Culdesac retail, where the the number of customers that come along the light rail just keeps going up. So now there's multiple shop owners that have the light rail schedule so that they know when the next wave of customers is coming. So we just had it was a day market this weekend, heavily trafficked, and we love it because it brings more people to Culdesac and makes it a more vibrant place.
I love that. Stephen, can you talk to us about the small business strategy that Towerside has, or how you're integrating local businesses that were already existing into your plans, and helping to scale up, businesses that may need support or may need, development in their structures, and this could be not just retail, but also, innovation businesses and things like that. I think you know where I'm headed. Let's talk about how we are supporting, creative office space and things like that in the Towerside development.
And I'd be remiss to not mention one of our sibling district, the Creative Enterprise Zone, which is more on St. Paul side, and we share geography. And that geography was really more old industrial warehouses that still had usable space, and it was full of artists, designers, architects, graphic designers, and they kind of really had the same impetus around the same time as what we now call Towerside, and it was more focused on displacement prevention and keeping artists and creatives here, enabling affordability so that they weren't displaced by all of this work. And I think creativity and innovation are two sides of the same coin, and it's really important that, and so we just did an economic development study together for both of our districts. It doesn't make sense for us to do this on our own. We're working in the same economy, in the same system. What has been the retail change? What are the demographic shifts? And what are the big moves that are happening? And especially being right next to the University of Minnesota, which is kind of just embarking on its official innovation district, I would say. It's likely to be over 1 million square feet over the next couple of decades. And it's going to be these big biolab spaces and Medtronics and others having a kind of a corporate presence. Well, what are the secondary and tertiary businesses? Where do they drop their kids off for daycare? Where do they take clients to lunch? Where does all of those things happen? And so really making it human-centric to say, what does life living in a transit-connected, multimodal community look like? And how do we facilitate that? What are those pieces that are missing? And there's arts organizations on the avenue that have been there for decades and weathered light rail construction with difficulty, but were committed to the idea of being in the innovation district because they saw their role in that they're a home for creatives, they're a home for a community, and wanted to make sure that they were part of that.
Yeah, I think throughout this conversation we've been talking a lot about community, and I think it's really important to define what that means, right? Like, who is the community that you're planning for? Who are you actively seeking out to engage? And how are you creating community wealth? I think of community wealth as not only being the dollars and cents, but again, the feeling of belonging, the spaces where people can gather and play and get to know each other. I think we're all familiar with that book, Bowling Alone, and how there is this sort of loneliness epidemic that's happening across America. And people are isolated and not meeting their neighbors and feeling like they are separate from the broader world that's going on around them, that they're an individual island and everybody else is as well. How are you creating these spaces for community, and how are you ensuring that those who have historically been and strategically, been marginalized from these spaces gain access?
That's one of my favorite questions. And back to the civic infrastructure piece. So it's actually one of the questions in our Community Pulse survey. Like, how many neighbors do you know? How welcome do you feel here? Because those are huge metrics of success that we need to baseline on and to continue to grow from. Hopefully there are great responses out of that, but I'm guessing, having lived in many of these kinds of spaces and places, that you don't know your neighbors. Some of our strategies are about asking the landowners and the property managers there. That's a kind of a group of community that they're in touch with their residents. They have the pulse on their building, but who has the pulse on the block?
Yeah.
And that's where I think Towerside can come in and play a role. And there's that missing middle of community development and civic infrastructure to pay attention to. And similar to the stormwater system, what if you all gave us a share of your engagement budget that you have for your residents, and let's do a neighborhood-wide one. It does, like, residents don't know each other. The senior housing folks would love to do some babysitting, but no one's there to help facilitate and broker that conversation. And for me, it's always about like centering place, we're shaping place. We've always done this as a community, historically, as a species, and that's part of what's really broken. How do we do that again? And to bring the project opportunities and ask people what they think about what's here, what do they need, how does their life work, and really have a more authentic human conversation, more than just, what do you think of this mural, or what do you think of this grocery store?
Yeah, Ryan.
What's the question?
So we're thinking about community wealth and how we're creating it and how we are ensuring that not only is it available to those who have access and funds and dollars to participate in it, but those who have been strategically marginalized from the green spaces and the transportation access and all of the things that your site gives people access to, right? Like it's talking about like who is your community and how are you ensuring that your community is actually diverse and actually a representation of the full spectrum of people who live in Tempe or in Phoenix.
Yeah, and the best way to see that is to see that there's all demographics there, and the appeal of walkable neighborhoods goes across all generations, all demographics. The National Association of Realtors, they now do a survey every 3 years on transportation preferences, and they found that the majority of every generation would prefer to live in a walkable neighborhood and even pay more, including 92% of Gen Z, but even the boomers, most of them would prefer to live in a walkable neighborhood. The problem is that the great walkable neighborhoods have become exorbitantly expensive. It's a tragedy that it costs $2 million for a crappy apartment in the West Village, but that's just how good of a neighborhood it is. But we can build many more of those and make them accessible for all. And I see lots of opportunities in all the parking lots around the country that those are great places to redevelop, and it's a park in waiting.
Thank you, Ryan. So part of what you're doing at a conference like this is sharing ideas with people who don't live in your locale. And so I'm thinking, how do we think about this portfolio approach to transport-oriented development, and how does this impact scalability? So should your projects be scaled? People often ask, is your project scalable? I'm asking, should they be scalable? Is there a kit of parts that you've created that folks here should take back to their locales and say, I learned this thing at the Mpact conference, and I think that we should be doing this here in Detroit or in Salem, Oregon, or wherever. Is your model something that we should replicate, and is it replicable?
You're going to be shocked at my answer, but yes. And part of the reason we did this is to show other cities and other developers that you can build walkable neighborhoods again in the U.S. in the 2020s. And it's a really risky business in real estate. Everybody asks where something has been done before, cities, investors, et cetera. And they can point to Culdesac now, and that's happening in waves. Next month, the U.S. Mayor's Conference is in Tempe, and they picked it because they're all coming to Culdesac. We've had so many different political visits and developer visits. So this is something that works. If it can work in Phoenix, it can work in your area. The tailwinds from the transportation technologies are only getting stronger, and this is a scalable model. And others should develop like this. We have our own growth plans, and we want to scale up as well. So,
can you talk to us a little bit about, so this project is 17 acres. How much of it is currently developed?
8 acres.
8 acres. How many of your cities have 8 acres, contiguous 8 acres that you could develop now?
Tell me where.
I see 3 hands. I see a hand back there, a hand back there, a hand back there.
Come find me after.
This is not a sales pitch for you. This is more about how do we do this when we have less than 8 acres? How do we do this when we have 31,000 square feet? Or, you know what I mean? Like, how do we do this on a smaller scale?
So 31,000 square feet is pretty close to the land that we had for our 2 pocket neighborhoods. And so 2 neighborhoods that it's, they're 44 units collectively, or 44 homes, I should say. And it's possible, small-scale multifamily is about to be a huge trend. A lot of the reasons why there isn't more small-scale multifamily is because of rules that basically banned it, just like walkable neighborhoods have been effectively illegal in most of the country. And then also construction technology. There's changes in things like single staircase laws, parking minimums that make it possible. And so when we say there's not a lot of developable land, there actually is. We can take individual parcels and just look at them differently.
And Stephen, obviously, most of us don't have 370 acres. So what does it look like to, and here in Portland, we do have some innovation districts, right? We do have some, sustainable districts that we have designated. But how do we do the work that you're doing at the scale that you're doing with the partnerships that you've cultivated in our municipalities across the country?
For me, it always comes back to the systems and understanding your place in the system from where you are. And I was harping on our Metro Transit folks a little bit ago. We've got a big bus garage right outside downtown Minneapolis, and it is not a very walkable or friendly environment. Like this could be an opportunity for you to operate in your system, to invest in something different in this space. And I think that's just that perspective work and really inviting people to stop reading policy line for line and really think bigger about where we can affect change and then who else plays in that space, because none of us can do this by ourselves. So is it an arts group? Is it a neighborhood association? Is it an agency? Is it another development group that wants to get started and try a small scale development? There's lots of different ways to approach that. And hopefully Towerside's work is replicable, but again, at that systems level more than at the scale.
Yeah. And then I have to always ask, because I always want to know where the money is coming from. So where's the money coming from for Towerside? This is a huge project. Yes.
Yes.
So, yes.
The early days, it was a really kind of compelling stone soup. Everyone put money in the pot. So Blue Cross Blue Shield would throw a little bit of money in. Utilities, that kind of big partner list would contribute. And just to more of the general fund. And this was kind of unincorporated, fiscally sponsored little group that got together. And as its governance grew, tried to formalize that with these partnerships. Projects were really funded through a lot of grants. So Green 4th Street was a fund from our regional government group for walkability. Blue Cross investing in the design. The watershed kind of bringing to the table that exchange of you invest the costs you already would have, and we can help scale that up in a different way. And otherwise, so that's happened. That all tapered off after COVID. Was very quiet for a number of years. So we're back into kind of a new mode of capacity for the last 24 months with some big philanthropy funding. And it was actually funding for our district energy system. We were very close to making one happen. The project fell through, and it was, well, there isn't another project teed up, but we need this ecosystem and these other interconnected systems to try to make that viable, continue the work.
Thank you so much. And so now we have an audience activity for you. Before you get to ask questions, I would love for you all to turn to your neighbor and say a word or two, a sentence about what you've heard so far and what you think is the most compelling thing. Just it gets you talking, right? Like if you turn from listening to just like, what are your questions? You're like, oh. So we get you talking a little bit, and then we'll come back and hopefully you'll have a question or four for the panel. So if you're not sitting directly next to someone, find somebody and share with them your name. You don't have to tell them what you do because that might take too long. And then something compelling that you are taking away from this panel. And you only have 3 minutes. You guys can drink some water, and you guys can drink some water. 46. Well, somebody tell me their time, because I know my watch. Right? Yeah, because it's very hard to go from like, I'm listening to like, I have a question. One more minute. Yeah. So is your plan to stay in those in the rental unit? Like, what's your plan? Oh. Is that your plan?
Am I going to live there still?
That's exciting. I love that. All right. All right, everyone. You guys got really chatty. I love that. All right. We're pulling it back to the group. You want to share the joke? No, I'm joking. Thank you all for talking with your neighbors. I hope that that has created a wellspring of questions for our panel. So we have this mic in the center aisle that you can use to ask the burning questions that you have. So don't all run to the mic at once. Or maybe you want to share a takeaway. Yes, I see. Yeah, thank you. And share your name and maybe where you're from.
Yeah, I'm Jordan Swain. I'm from Salt Lake City, and we should talk. And with Arcadis, our name is up there. But no, so these ideas are so exciting, and I got chills several times while you were talking. However, I'm thinking that right now at this point in our history, they're marginal, right? They're not central within our culture. What can we do as planners and designers and policymakers and thinkers to help turn your innovations into like centralized ideas and systems in our culture?
So the biggest thing that cities can do is to give certainty, speed, and clarity of rules in the development business, the pre-development costs, where you have to spend money to find out if a project's going to happen, and when the project doesn't happen, that's very painful. And the more clear, fast, and certain things are, it actually lowers costs a lot by lowering risk.
And I'm just like thinking through, like, there's so many complex systems and silos to navigate. We're trying to navigate them in slightly different ways than the norm. Like, explore those as policy changes happen, as comprehensive plans come through. Think through how do you apply these kinds of case studies to that, and think through like where can we adjust and deviate from these things in certain different ways to try to get better outcomes, and to like be willing to be entrepreneurial as a public sector is, I think, a huge big piece of that.
I'm short. Hi, I'm Ashley from Los Angeles. So I had a couple of questions. One was about what were some of the ordinance changes or the zoning changes that allowed your projects to happen? Another was the ecosystem of transit options that you guys were able to kind of collect in both of your projects. Was that already there and you kind of connected them, or were they attracted by your work, or have more been attracted by your work as a result of the success of it? And then we have, last question, there are three, and I apologize, and I'll repeat any. A lot of the projects, well, both of your projects were flat and in warm places, and some of the places that I work in are not. Okay, maybe not. Okay, so we can, yes, please, yeah, to get to that scale in these different climates, the different multimodal, like how does that work? But those are my questions.
So the first question was about zoning changes. So maybe, Ryan, you can talk about the variance changes, and you can talk about the resolution again.
Yeah, the way we did it was there was a development agreement that let us build without residential parking. It was the first of its kind. It was a PUD as well.
And I'd say one of the bigger things we did in our last round of comprehensive plans for our policy was kind of amended a production and processing plus mixed use opportunity, that if there's a certain FAR of production processing, because this was an industrial area, industrial land is still very valuable to cities. If that can be satisfied, more density with housing can be included on top of it. And so it really creates this very interesting mix of things, and we're working on how to deal with the trucks and trailers.
I remember the last one. It was about the fact that Ashley thought that both of the projects were in warm climes, but Minnesota,
I use sunny pictures, sorry.
It's snowy and cold. So maybe talk about, I think the question is about getting people to utilize public transit even when the weather is not sunny and dry.
I think I come back to the idea of our maintenance district and how we care for the Green 4th Street space, and that's really about like, oh yeah, we can't just build these things and put a lot of concrete down. Like, we have to care for them, we have to operate them, and so really making sure, like, is the garbage emptied? Is the sidewalk and the crosswalk plowed? Like, the number of emails I have to send about is the garbage emptied is way more than you would think. But it's a real piece, and that changes how people think about walking and being part of a place, and if they're comfortable.
And I think the third question was about the confluence of the multimodal transportation system. Was it already present, or did you curate it?
A lot of it was present, and some of it's how it's packaged, and also we thought of it as take each of the different modes and really empower it to be the best version of itself, and design around that, and build programs with residents around that.
And ours, the Green Line was kind of long planned, and as soon as the route came through, really instigated a lot of this. The new BRT extension was proposed since that time, and its terminus is actually in Towerside, but the question of where it was was a big factor, and I think all the development work that we've done, the thousands of new people who are living here, and the new businesses extended it deeper into our district than where it would have started otherwise.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mike Mariano, architect with the Schematic Workshop up in Seattle. I appreciate everything that both of you have shared here today. We do a lot of mixed-use multifamily, a lot of affordable housing projects, also do co-housing, which is resident-led projects, 10 to 40 units, that kind of scale. And it seems like what you guys are starting to introduce is a scale of connection. People do long to belong, and it seems like there's opportunities for people to connect in the interstitial spaces that you're providing. But there's some power dynamic issues there that we get around in our co-housing projects, but not so much in the rental. And I'm just kind of wondering, how are you guys finding people connecting? It's like each other, but how are you getting past into a sense of agency and self-determination for the residents? I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, and I appreciate everything you guys are doing.
It's something I want to keep doing so much more work on because there's a long road in that. I'd say, so we also did some interim uses similar to the night market. We had a pop-up park, a harvest festival every year in the fall on the site of the future park that we wanted to be a park before we even thought it was going to be. And I think that was a moment of bringing the folks from the existing neighborhood, other people in, and really establish that mental model and culture that, this is a place for everybody. And I remember having a developer there who looked at there's a giant set of grain silos, and he's like, Stephen, we have to do something with these. And it was this, you have to create the context and environment for people to see things differently. And so all that programming, and so we did that before the park was built. COVID happened while the park was constructed. And now there's been a neighborhood resident who's been curating their own harvest festival ever since. I'm happy to hand that off, happy to scale, bring that out. It's going to take a whole ecosystem of actors and people to do this work. We don't need to hold all of it. If others want to tap that and grow it, great.
Yeah, similarly, we think of it sort of like a campus where we create the environment where these connections can happen, and a lot of that's the physical layout. We throw some events that help people meet each other, and then now the residents throw many more events than we do, and there's all kinds of different activities that are happening from that, and then it becomes a flywheel effect.
Cool. All right, I got a couple quick comments, questions. Thank you so much. Fiona Lyon, TriMet TOD Program Manager. I think one of the questions we have, maybe Brian for you, Stephen, for you first. We are really curious, just infrastructure-wise, you have a great depth of board of directors, but your staff on your website literally just lists you. Is it literally just you that does all this work? Could you kind of give us a picture of what your organization looks like from an infrastructure perspective?
Yes. Small team. I started about 18 months ago as our first executive director. It was kind of really board-driven until then, so I just brought on a new staff person, so the website's out of date. I apologize. That's the reality of having a small, scrappy nonprofit, but our Instagram is doing great, so take a look at that. So I'm 2.5 staff people, a board of about 10, 11, and thinking through, how do we work with partners? How do we provide capacity to partners, and how do they value that to us, to the business model kind of component? Where does the money come from? And vice versa.
Cool.
Fiona, you have 3 people behind
Okay.
you, and we have 4 minutes. So
Okay.
unless there's a really burning question that you think we need to hear.
Maybe I'll just make a quick comment. So I think you're preaching to the choir here. We all love this. I think 2 of the things that we just identified was, it feels like the developer audience, there's not a lot of developers that want to take risk. How can you guys push a playbook into that world that will help influence this conversation? And then similarly, we were really impressed by just the cul-de-sacs model of working with the fire department. Could you push stuff towards the fire department that impacts other cities? It's something that we all deal with. Playbooks for winning changes.
I love that.
Hi, Ryan and Stephen. I'm Yash. I'm an urban designer with Perkins & Will from San Francisco. I have 2 questions. I'll make it really quick.
I want you to make it 1.
Okay. There are 2 different people, so I can't really. To Ryan, okay, how does your model work with cities which have an older demography and the one that thinks the car is needed? Do you have any awareness programs that try to create this no car model? Mm-hmm. And a follow-up to that would be that how successful can no car developments work when the adjacent developments around them are car-centric? Does it work in a silo, or how do you create a system like that? Because right now your development is just singular. And the next question to Stephen is, when you're thinking geothermal in an innovation district, it's going to be phased over a long period of time. How are developers strategizing to work on the geothermal system? Because we're working on a similar project in an innovation district, and the struggle there is the developers, when they're parsing out different land parcels, and they're going to be built over phases, how do you align all developers to work towards a system? Because that works only when the whole development is completed. So yeah, two questions.
So our model works best when the more walkable neighborhoods work best when they're around other walkable neighborhoods. The project across the street, their advertising is we're Culdesac, but we're next to Culdesac, but with parking. All the things advertised is around Culdesac. It's still better to have more development, but ideally it would be walkable.
And you hit the nail on the head with the challenge that we had with shared district heating, cooling, is that there's a certain kind of load capacity needed to justify the system. And unless you're an institution like a university building 1 million square feet at once, which we're hoping that they will entertain this idea, it's impossible to do that. And so that's how our project fell through, was a developer would have to have committed to another 500,000 square feet of development over 10 years, and that's a huge risk that he just could not absorb, and there was no one else to take on that risk. So that's where we're thinking through, like, is there more individual project efforts, or is it really district and scaled?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm from Seattle, and the housing market is crazy there. And so outside of Seattle, we've got a lot of big buildings being built, but they're all leased. And so my interest is whether or not what you're selling is the smallest residential units that you have available. And if you're not doing that, why not? One of the things that really is...
I want to just, less preamble and just like question.
So that's the, so I'm interested in like generational wealth, so that, you know, people lower threshold for being able to be a homeowner. So are you selling like the smallest residential spaces? And if you're not, why is that?
So our project that are for sale, the whole project is could be mixed in the future. But one important thing is construction defect liability. So many states, including Arizona, have rules that effectively make it so developers won't build for sale. There are no developers that are building multifamily for sale projects because of the liability involved. There's a whole industry of class action lawsuits that fly the HOAs to Cabo, and so that's why the only for sale stuff is not multifamily. And that's another thing that cities could change.
We have that same legal problem, but I think there's a dynamic with, it's all multifamily rental, but having the ability for folks in the neighborhood, the single family neighborhood, to move out of their homes and stop holding on to lots of space, move into and stay part of the neighborhood and open up that market for a new homeowner is kind of part of the system dynamic there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Super fast. Thank you, Akasha. This has been a fabulous session. Quick question for Ryan. So you said it's a mistake for any developers to be building structured parking now, given what's coming. My name is Darcy Kitching. I'm the director of Boulder Chamber Transportation Connections in Boulder, Colorado. We are the transportation management organization for the city of Boulder, and we're based in the Boulder Chamber of Commerce. And so developers are constantly harping at me about the parking kind of issues. We've just eliminated parking minimums in the city of Boulder. Okay, how do I convince developers of that? What you said about they shouldn't be building structured parking. Everyone's still worried about parking.
Yeah, they should send people to come see it at Culdesac, and developers, once they see it and see the feel, that it feels very different. That people say that it wasn't just seeing pictures and stuff; they had to come see it. And there's ways to transition, right? Not everything that we're doing will start as car free, but it's about the transition to this new world.
Thank you all so much. We appreciate you for spending your time with us. We're a little 2 minutes over, so you still have time to get to the next session, or is it lunch? I'm not sure. It's lunch, so we're good. Appreciate you all. If you have, our presentation will be up on the site for you to access later, and I think you all can access all of us and reach out to us with questions should you have them. And yay, Mpact conference. Thank you.
Thank you all.